Alright, so I've got some textures I want to show you, some additions, some ways of decorating, and these can be used. I've got this extruded piece that I'm adding these decorations to, but you could add this to something built with slabs, something on the extruder, a pinch pot, a coil pot, something thrown on the wheel, all sorts of different surfaces you can add this to. So I'm starting with kind of a blank surface. I've smoothed the surface with a rib to make it fairly smooth to begin with. And the first thing I want to show you is adding clay. So I've got a whole bunch of different ways to add clay, some of which are fairly simple. And so I'm going to start with a fairly simple decoration here. I'm going to make a little wiggly line out of clay, just a coil here, excuse me, that I've rolled. I'm going to score and slip my wiggly line, and I'm going to put it up against here. But I'm not exactly sure where it's going to line up, so I don't want to score my vase, my mug here yet. So I'm going to put a little bit of slip on here, on my scored edge, and then I'm going to hold it up against here, get it where I want it. I would recommend looking at it, but I want it to be visible for you. But now I'm not ready to stick it. I actually want to take it off. And what I've got here is a wiggly line that I can score, right, because it's the shape that I want it. I know it's the shape of the piece I'm sticking onto here. Now I've smeared some of my slip, so I can add a little bit more. And then I'm going to go ahead and stick this back on where I wanted it in the first place and squish it in place. Now, very simply, you can decorate pieces by adding a coil, right? Now, just like this, it's, you know, I've got a little wiggly line, a little snake or something. It's not the most exciting piece here, but I'm showing you the technique. You can make it exciting. So if you want to make, you know, words or decorations or a landscape or whatever it is. But I do want to show you a couple other things that are kind of fun with using a added coil. And one of those is some ways that you can clean up the edges. So I'm going to get in here with a loop tool, or I mean a rubber tip tool, excuse me, and kind of clean up this edge underneath. But on the top, I'm actually going to smear this clay into the rest of the clay. Now this is going to work if your clay is, the clay you're adding is leather hard, and it's going to work best if the clay you're adding it to is leather hard. But if you're adding it to, I'm sorry, this is going to work best if the clay is wet, if you're adding wet clay onto wet clay. But if the clay you're adding it onto is leather hard, you can actually score just a little bit farther up. So you can score that sort of back edge, and that'll help your added wet clay stick to your leather hard clay. So the reason I'm smoothing this up into place is to show you how you can make it look like the clay that you've added was a part of the original. And so I'm actually kind of going to come in with the rib, and my clay is real wet, so the surface is a little bit rough as I do this. I can come back through with a rib when it's dried up a little bit as well. But it's starting to kind of seem like this top part of the clay, that this line kind of grew out of there. I can make it seem more like that by kind of stretching from behind, particularly if my clay is wet. And I can get it to almost look like my added coil is just sort of a drip from the top, or the structure of the top hanging over the structure that's happening underneath. We do this when we're doing sculpture and stuff as well. So maybe it looks like that's the hair up at the top, right? Or that's the eaves of a house, or whatever it is you're trying to create. So you can add a coil. You can also add a slab of clay. So if you've got a slab rolled out already, I happen to have one handy right here. It's leather hard. I'm gonna just cut it. It's not very exciting. You guys are gonna make it be interesting. I'm just gonna show you the technique. And I can score up this edge. I can score up where I'm going to add it on here. Put a little bit of slip. I'm putting the slip on the leather hard piece rather than the wet piece, because this one needs some added moisture. When you stick leather hard to wet, one of the things that's happening while it dries is the wetness of this and the dryness of this are kind of mixing. And so if you let this dry nice and slow, the moistures are going to be more similar. This is actually going to get a bit wetter before it gets dry, and this, of course, is going to get drier. and then they can both dry together. I can clean up my edge, I can add a coil, or just what I'm doing here, kind of have that be a sharpish edge. And of course you can add a more exciting decoration that way. Now I've also got some stamps and things over here that I want to use. And I've got two kinds of stamps, or actually one is called a stamp and one is a sprig. And I'm just trying to find an interesting stamp here. Okay, we're going with a star. So these are stamps that people have made out of clay. You can make your own, but I'm going to show you how to use them right now. Now a stamp is just one of these things that presses into clay. So I've just made a little disc of wet clay. I'm going to take my little star stamp, press it into that clay. Hopefully I didn't stick to the table. I did. It's a good idea to do this on a piece of paper. But I've stuck my little stamp in there. I can score this guy and stick it on to my thing that I'm making. We also have some, I'm going to press this one just onto my hand so it doesn't stick. We also have some little, I'm going to grab an egg here. We have some little pastas and things like that, so you can do a decoration that way, score and slip, stick it on there. A sprig is basically the opposite of a stamp, so it's a concave stamp. So I'm going to take some clay and actually press it into that space there. And then I'm going to score this back. I'm going to find a spot to attach it on here that's not quite so full of stuff. I'm going to add a little bit of slip here, and I'm going to press these two together. And when that comes out, I've got the texture of this. Now this one was made from a button. I've got another video where you can actually see how to make these stamps. But this button I could then stick on there over and over again. This is a finished piece where you can see somebody's used a sprig. It wasn't this exact one, but they've used a sprig, they've scored and slipped, and they've attached this little sprig decoration over and over and over again. When they glazed it, they added some color, and so it has, has a really nice kind of finished decorative look to it. My piece, of course, I'm doing all the things at once, so I wouldn't recommend that. But you can use these in pieces. You can use them to decorate. You can add clay. Remember, anytime you're adding clay to clay, you want to score and slip. You want to make sure it's stuck on there really well. Thanks.